Okay, so I hope we are very close to start our session. Thank you, everyone. I believe several of us are going to join in the next few minutes. First of all, thank you, everyone, for joining this session. First of all, I'm Dr. Giriraj Amarnath, Research Group Lead for Water Data for Climate Resilience. So good afternoon or good morning or even good evening to people calling from Southeast Asia. So one of our speaker is joining from Canada. It's even 5 a.m. in the morning. So really appreciate all of you for taking your interest. So again, on behalf of International Water Management Institute, I warmly welcome you to our session 12, Eyes on the Storm webinar series, which was started in mid-March as part of an initiative to advance early warning for all. You might be very familiar under the Secretary General mandate, this global campaigning was started. And today's session is very, very close to my heart in terms of equity in early warning system and how we can integrate gender and social inclusion dimension. In the past, we talked about technology, model data, risk assessment, anticipatory action, early financing instruments. So this is a very important and relevant because this is something where early warning information has to reach to the last mile in terms of ensuring everyone is empowered with the right kind of information. And also, it is very clear that early warning is something where it is designed to reduce disaster risk, minimizing the damages, and more important, to safeguard the lives and properties. And often, the challenges that overlooked in this early warning system is about who can access to this warning and who understand them, because there are highly technical information. We need to bring a more human-centered approach, and who is able to act in a more collective action. And often, early warning is not just about delivering of information to someone. We are talking about gender and social inclusion, ensuring women, girls, person with disability, youth, or indigenous communities, and many other part of those landscape of gender inclusion have to be mainstreamed when it comes to delivery of this information. So I'm not going to speak more about what it is. This is where the experts are there. I'm really particularly, as I said, it's very relevant and important to listen from our experts in terms of the real world case studies, cross-sectoral collaboration in terms of experts coming from UN Women, World Vision, Save the Children, and my own colleagues from the International Water Management Institute to really take out the evidences or the impact that they have listened and they have drive that work with the country partners to make sure that is how these systems are more inclusive, equitable, and effective. So without further delay, let me introduce my first speaker, who is Ms. Madhavi, who is supporting IMI in the past in terms of anticipatory action program. She is a senior expert, disaster, climate risk, and resilient development. She holds a degree in MSc in agriculture economics and agronomy. Her professional interests are political economy of development, gender equality, social inclusion. And she comes from a major background of working with government, civil society, United Nations organizations, notably leading the disaster risk management programs in South Asia. So she also worked as a gender advisor, project manager in UNDP, Sri Lanka during the time of tsunami recovery program. This is where Sri Lanka has been heavily impacted in tsunami. And without further delay, let me request Ms. Madhavi to share your presentation. You will be speaking for about 10 minutes, and then we will have excellent panel discussion that will be led by Deepa Joshi. Over to you.
Uh, Greetings, everyone. I'm not saying good morning, good evening. I'm sure there are people joining from various places. And thank you very much, Dr. Giriraj, for the opportunity to join this discussion as well as for your introduction. Just please tell me whether you can see my presentation now.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Right. So we are discussing in this webinar about the issues related to gender equality and social inclusion when it comes to early warning systems. First of all, it's very clearly identified that early warning and early action is a key criteria for our for the entire global community who is striving for resilient development. So early warning systems have been there for several decades in the past century, in this century. But to be effective, there are at least three criteria that the systems must have. What are these criteria? First of all, they need to be people-centered. This is underlined, taking into consideration early warning systems very often tend to be heavily technical and physical characteristics focused. So people-centered element is emphasized. Also, due to the same reason, the warnings also tend to be of very often very technical nature, technical language. But when we say people-centered, the warnings need to be understood and accessed by the people for whom they are meant for, the people at risk, and they need to be actionable. We need to be clear what actions people can take upon receiving a warning, and that action need to be timely. And for all the about 2 points to be practical, it's important that vulnerable populations need to be empowered to take appropriate action. So the topic of our discussion today, the inclusion, social inclusion, equality, equity become critical in all these aspects. So with that background, let's look at what is the relevance and need for underlining gender equality and social inclusion, which is underlined in all the global agreements, early warning for all, the very specific programs such as early warning for all. I'm not going to go into details why some sections of society are more vulnerable than others. I would assume that this is fairly well discussed topic. But what I would underline is when it comes to vulnerable groups, they are challenged and they face specific difficulties in preparing and recovering from multiple forms of discrimination and vulnerabilities that they face, and these becomes different factors of vulnerability and marginalization become complex issues when several of them affect a group of individuals, groups of individuals in society. So very quickly, who are we talking about here? Some of the well-accepted groups, this is not exclusive, people living in rural areas, indigenous people, the language-related issues, children, ethnic and linguistic groups, people with disabilities, migrants, sexual minorities, youth and older people, and women and girls in all the above groups. So what are the critical underlying factors we need to look at? There is vulnerability and exposure to risk, social exclusion and marginalization. So when we take these critical underlying factors, through early warning and early action, when we are trying to support varying social groups with effective early warning and early action, that requires to understand their socioeconomic context and circumstances. Now, reflect on the groups I just listed. Their social and economic context and their circumstances are very different. So we need to have a good understanding what kind of specific vulnerabilities, specific requirements, and specific capacities that these groups have to manage with early warning related actions. And in order for them to be able to access and respond, they need to be empowered. They need to be actively engaged in defining messages, in defining what kind of response mechanisms and what kind of actions required from their side. So this empowerment also include not just increasing their awareness, but also how implementing agencies interact with them, the two-way communication, the engagement, which is a governance issue. The CGIAR Systems Climate Action Program has established this platform, which is in short AWARE, which is for early warning, early actions, and early response. And this is part of the climate program, which is called CLIMBER program of the CGIAR system for climate resilience. And this is a risk governance platform, which is digitally enabled, capturing the digital, using the digital innovations that we have to direct them for early warning and early response. And this is expected to be, and it acts as a tool designed to facilitate mainly the connectivity between the technical and decision-making institutions with humanitarian and humanitarian organizations and the stakeholders in early warning, and including the communities at risk, aiming for more effective warning mechanisms. So this platform effectively connects risk and vulnerability information, which is a technical part, early warning mechanisms, which include communication messaging, proactive measures for mitigating the impact, and mobilization of timely financial inputs for early action. So for the AWARE platform, we developed a strategic framework to ensure that all activities related to early warning, early action, and early warning, early response incorporate the issues of the vulnerable groups, specifically aspects of gender equality and social inclusion. So here again, gender equality and social inclusion have been addressed for a long time. However, while the importance and the need is well accepted as essential in disaster risk reduction, in disaster risk management, and in building resilient and sustainable development, community empowerment. However, in practice, these issues have not advanced as expected. Therefore, it is important to specifically pay attention in every project, in every program, and in platforms such as AWARE. So, realizing this need, this strategic framework was developed for the AWARE platform. This was developed for the purpose to more effectively enabling coordination between hazard and vulnerability information, warning messages, response capacities, financial management, and governance aspects, aimed for effective early warning mechanisms that reach all vulnerable at-risk groups. So this integrates scientific, technical, research, risk governance, and social elements, which are critical for effective early warning mechanisms that are people-centered and reach all. So the approach is that early warning systems, anticipatory action, the three pillars, the early warning, early action, early finance, actually offer much opportunities to work on this gender equality and social inclusion issues. So this is also aiming that we are not leaving a missed opportunity to be more effective in early warning, early response for aiming for resilient communities. So what are the key characteristics of the anticipatory action system, which incorporates gender and social inclusion? This is adapted from the work of the ASEAN, the regional organization for the intergovernmental organization for the Southeast Asia region. So as you see, when in a disaster crisis, the timely identification of triggers remains a crux here. And with the timely identification, you can see there is a window, a time-bound window for risk monitoring and early warning. And the three main phases: preparedness, anticipatory action, and response. And anticipatory action particularly need to look at what are the gender-based issues with the community that the anticipatory action is reaching out, and what are the social marginalization issues. And this actually consistently following this concept, the logic and the understanding will lead to long-term resilience and capacity of the diverse vulnerable groups we talked about. In developing this strategic framework for gender and social inclusion, the methodology was research of secondary sources and looking at global and regional good practices. And then there are pilot settings, anticipatory action pilot settings in 2 districts in Sri Lanka, initiated by the International Water Management Institute, and they are in Nuwara and Anuradhapura districts in Sri Lanka. So the community and stakeholder consultations were several rounds were conducted in these sites with at-risk communities and the other stakeholders, the government, the management, and other institutions which are critical for inclusive anticipatory action. So through the consultations, we were able to identify what are the key issues concerning these different groups: men, women, children, elderly people. We spoke to the young people, the management of the tea estates in one of the tea estate in one of the sites, and so the specific focus of our consultation was what are the need-based actions for different community groups who are in these settings, what are their capacities, and what are the opportunities and inroads for inclusive action. So based on these consultations, a strategic framework was developed. What are the possibilities for gender equality and social action with these communities? And we also validated this strategy with the same stakeholders. And we were also able to formulate a set of guiding principles for gender and social inclusion incorporation for wider reference and action, of course. So here is this slide captures the main components of the strategic framework. And on the left-hand side corner, you see the commonly grouped most vulnerable groups like children, older people, women, people belonging to lower castes, indigenous people. These will differ depending on the context of the community that anticipatory action is trying to reach out. And then below that are the main issues of the vulnerable groups, such as lack of opportunity to express, participate or contribute. Usually when it comes to the top-down early warning, they sometimes they cannot access information, or they don't have access to communication technologies. And the language issue, the understanding a message, and what sort of action they can take. So action is often not individual, it's group action. Therefore, it's extremely important the community organization and understanding what sort of capacities they have to engage directly contributing with, and what kind of specific support they require. So this is community context, location specific, which needs to be identified. And what it leads to, what are the strengths of gender inclusive and gender and social inclusive anticipatory action. First of all, it allows participation and empowerment of community organizations, women's groups, informal networks, local leadership, and community members. It also utilizes locally adaptive solutions and innovations for warning and response, local languages and communication methods, and capacities of the gender-based roles and responsibilities, the regular socially assigned roles. When we work on inclusion, it provides opportunities to enhance those. And it improves outreach and targeting of the most vulnerable, which is critical aspects of any early warning systems, the targeting the most vulnerable, interagency coordination, stakeholder coordination, and resource efficiency. So with the extreme right-hand corner list out what is the approach, like risk information. In risk information, I will not go to the details in interest of time.
Madhavi,
So
that's the presentation.
when we say risk information, we are talking about disaggregated data, context-specific social aspects, and then planning and operations. How do we ensure that all vulnerable groups are given opportunity to express their needs and their engagement? Pre-arranged finance, a critical aspect to be for gender and social inclusion. You need pre-arranged finance to have the gender and social expertise in the implementation and planning teams, and for targeted action, as well as for engaging the vulnerable groups, and then impact evaluation. So I will conclude with a few main observations related to this strategic framework for gender equality and social inclusion in early warning. First one, vulnerability and exclusion issues remain critical underlying factors when we are talking about early warning and response, effective response. Targeting, identifying early action and delivery, and making financial allocations, as well as for overall decision-making process to ensure participation and access of the vulnerable groups. Secondly, gender and social inclusion considerations need to be incorporated from the beginning of the process. So it cannot be afterthought when entire system has been discussed, planned, designed, and then you realize what about the gender and the inclusion aspect. So this need to be addressed from the very beginning, and it need to be remain in all phases throughout the entire process of anticipatory action, from risk and vulnerability identification to impact monitoring. Then when we think about early warning and response and early action and raising finance, there are several institutions engaged. Some are technical, like the meteorology departments or ministries, disaster management related institutions, the social sector, the social security related institutions, communication institutions, finance-related institutions, humanitarian organizations, and the organizations representing the vulnerable populations. It could be youth organizations, women's groups, disability organizations. So there are many institutions as well as fragmentation. One set of organizations take care of technical, another set take care of communication, likewise. So therefore, these institutional fragmentation issues need to be addressed from the outset, and platforms such as Aware actually provides a medium to address this fragmentation. And also the digital innovations that we can access need to be used to streamline the capacities, dissemination, and to direct social benefits. So I will conclude here, and further details of key actions and guiding principles you can access in the working paper published. And I have provided the details here. Thank you very much, and I look forward to listen to the rest of the speakers.
Thank you, Ms. Madhavi, for the detailed, fascinating presentation. I would not repeat to what you have already said, but given the limited time, let me invite Dr. Deepa Joshi, who is Gender and Social Inclusion Lead at the International Water Management, to moderate the session. Her background is in feminist political ecology. Her work also focuses on environmental policies, institutions, and governance to reshape intersectional inequalities, including gender, class, ethnicity, poverty, and identity, especially around water, sanitation, and climate and food systems. So without further delay, let me come over Deepa to introduce the panel experts and then take it over from there. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Giriraj. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much, Madhavi. Before I introduce the panelists, I just want to add that, your presentation really brings to picture very clearly that those who are most affected in disasters and disaster risks are, who have the highest vulnerability to disaster risks are often the socially excluded and marginalized, includes women, children, and other groups. And therefore, these interventions, the early warning interventions and other interventions in disaster risk really need to be people-centered. So that message comes across so clearly in your presentation, but also through the framework that you have shared. What you also point out is that communication is so key and crucial in efficient disaster risk management. And I thought it's interesting to point out that in 2025, the GCMA report notes that 885 million women are still not connected to the mobile internet. And although this number is a significant reduction from earlier times, yet it is significantly high, and especially high in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. So, addressing these issues are really very complex, but also the need of the hour. And I think that is precisely why, the UN Women points out that digital technologies are really revolutionizing food, water, climate interventions, but at the same time, they could possibly be incubating new gender and social inclusion inequalities. So it's really, really timely and topical that we are discussing this issue. And I would like now to invite our first speaker, the first panelist who will be presenting, who is Ms. Anna Pellekonen from the UN Women, who has a specialization in gender and disaster risk reduction and climate resilience. And Anna's work has really pointed out that gender equality and social inclusion is at the core of all resilience building interventions. Over to you, Anna.
Good evening, everyone. I am in Bangkok, so it is 7:30 in the evening here. And thank you for inviting UN Women to join this panel. So I will say a few words about UN Women's work in the disaster risk reduction and how we work on early warning systems. So I'll start with the Human Rights Foundation because that's where UN Women's mandate starts from. So I'll begin with CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It's often also referred to as the International Bill of Rights for Women. And CEDAW is a legally binding international treaty. It's been signed by 189 states in the world, and it's foundational to UN Women's mandate. So this CEDAW, it has a general recommendation 37 from the year 2018, and that recommendation focuses on disaster risk reduction and climate change. And it's very clear that states have a legal obligation to ensure that all aspects of disaster risk management, including early warning systems, are inclusive, non-discriminatory, and responsive to the specific needs of women, girls, and marginalized groups. But too often, as we probably have seen, we still fall short. And that's not because of the technology is lacking in today's world, but it's because the systems are just simply not designed for everyone. So UN Women's approach to changing this is threefold. So we support governments to build inclusive systems, and we strengthen the evidence base to inform smarter policies. And then we also do programming. So I'll take one example from our gender and environment surveys. So UN Women has developed this model questionnaire that measures the nexus between gender and environment. And it can support governments in generating individual level data on women's and men's interactions with the environment, disasters, and natural resources. So this survey also has a set of questions relating to early warning. And this is one of the emerging best practices in the region of Southeast Asia at the moment. So I'll say a few words about this. So these gender and environment surveys are nationally representative official surveys that are led by the respective national statistic offices. And they are designed and implemented by the National Statistic Office with technical guidance and support from UN Women's stats team here in Bangkok. And so far, these surveys are completed, and now the governments have this very detailed set of information in Tonga, in Samoa, Cambodia, Mongolia, and Bangladesh is currently running their survey at the moment, and I think it should be ready by the mid next year. So these surveys, they basically collect the sex, age, and disability disaggregated data on how women and men, for example, among many other questions, receive early warning messages, trust different communication channels when it comes to early warning messages, how they respond to hazards after they get the early warning, and how, for example, caregiving roles or digital exclusion that you just mentioned earlier shapes the risk and their capacity to receive the early warning messages. So I'll say
I just want to point out here that we have 3 minutes and 2 rounds, so you're a little over the time. You can maybe hold back your messages, close the round, and come back to the messages the next time.
All right, okay. Let me check. Okay, so I actually just, I think I will be in 2 minutes. So I just wanted to say a few words about the Cambodia. So they concluded their report this year. So we learned through the surveys that about 2 in 5 people in Cambodia, so that is 42%, reported receiving early warning information, for example, on extreme heat days. And the surveys, they also showed that men tended to get early warning information through internet, while women relied more heavily on family, friends, and community members. And then when it came to taking action, women consistently outpaced men across almost every precautionary measure recorded in the survey, whether it be like preserving drinking water, isolating indoors, or moving livestock to safety. So the largest gender gaps appear to be in preserving water, food, and medicines, debts that often fall heavily on women because of their caregiving responsibilities. So just to close, so these surveys and the findings are really not just about data, even though it's really juicy bit of data that governments can get through these surveys, but they are also about accountability. So they give the governments the data and the tools to design early warning systems based on nationally representative data. And these are trusted, accessible, and actionable for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Now our next panelist is Ms. Chandrika Kularatna, from a technical specialist on disaster risk reduction at World Vision Lanka. She has over 19 plus years of field-based DRM experience at national, subnational, and local levels, and she's also a member of the Global Network of Civil Society Organizations. Chandrika, over to you. We would appreciate if you could speak for 3 minutes, and then we can come back to you in a second round. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deepa. Good evening, everyone. First, let me express my gratitude to IWMI for inviting World Vision Lanka for this important discussion. World Vision is an organization directly work with at-risk communities through our area programs and projects across Sri Lanka. And humanitarian response and disaster risk reduction are among our core areas of interventions. And our focus is mainly on the vulnerable children and communities. Over the years, we have implemented a number of disaster risk reduction projects and programs, and we always adopt community-based approaches like CBDRM, child-centered disaster risk management, and also anticipatory actions in our interventions. And inclusive early warning systems were a part of many of these our interventions over the years. What we actually learned through our experience is that the majority of disaster early warning systems are not inclusive enough, except some implemented under the special projects and programs by various organizations. There are gaps in risk understanding, forecasting, risk communication, and application of innovative and affordable technologies. We need more systematic, long-term, and collaborative efforts to overcome these challenges, and at the same time, strengthening community-driven, inclusive early warning systems is really, really important, as very correctly pointed out by Madhavi as well, especially in rural and marginalized context with less resources. For that, actually, we first need disaggregate risk data and information on women, children, persons with disabilities, and other marginalized groups as well. Such data actually will help us to better analyze their accessibility challenges, their ability to understand warnings, and their capacity to act on them as well. This understanding is really important to design and implement truly inclusive early warning systems in the ground. These vulnerable groups should not only be recipients, but also an active participants in decision making as well. They should represent these village disaster management structures like village disaster management committees, and their active participation in designing, implementing, and implementation of the early warning system is important. And it will make these systems more relevant and more trusted and more effective as well. And also, it is equally important to build community capacity to understand how this early warning system works, how to interpret warning messages, and to mobilize them to act on these messages. They can be supported by translating technical messages into simple, accessible messages in local languages, and also more convenient channels such as informal social networks, WhatsApp groups, sirens, community loudspeakers should be adopted for effective dissemination. And these community groups, especially these village disaster management committees, can be provided with the necessary tools and infrastructure to support this communication process as well, rather than depending on mainstream communication channels as well. And my final point is one response. To infrastructure, these facilities need to be appropriate to meet the specific needs of the vulnerable community groups. These safe centers should be equipped with prams, accessible toilets, and child-friendly spaces as well. And I stop from here, and thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chandrika. Now to the next speaker, Everesto Mapedza, who is a senior researcher at the International Water Management Institute based in South Africa. His specialization is on institutions, governance, and gender, and he has been working on these issues for 20 plus years. And I think very relevant to this webinar, he's also on the advisory group for the UN World Meteorological Organization. Over to you, Everesto.
Thank you very much, Deepa, and thank you very much to all the other co-panelists. I think they've made a lot of key insights in terms of how we can ensure that gender equality and social inclusion is at the anchor of early warning systems. Maybe one of the first comments that I would want to make is that for us to look at it from an institutional perspective, what we actually need is more of reframing and reconceptualization of what we mean by early warning. Because if you look at early warning, in most instances, we speak of delivering the early warning mile. But for me, I feel that this is a misnomer, because how can it be the last mile when these are the people, the women, men, the youths who are supposed to benefit from that information that we have? We actually need to turn it around to say, how do we engage the men, women, and youths? What are the priority areas that they would like to be warned about before we even think about providing early warning? So for me, I think in terms of institutional approach, that's one of the things we need to reframe, reconceptualize how we see the communities. These are not meant to be passive recipients of an early warning system, which maybe they don't even know about from the beginning. So one, let's see it as linking with, I think, the first speaker also speaking, I think all the other speakers highlighted on core, making sure that we have the communities as key. The other sort of point I would want to make is also the issue of the silo mentality, that you see that there is segmentation in terms of early warning system. In most cases, a number of countries we are working within sub-Saharan Africa, these tend to say, well, it's about whether this is supposed to be done meteorological department. It has nothing to do with agriculture, and agriculture say, so that on itself is a serious misnomer in the fact that looking at farmers and communities, their lives are more holistic. They don't look at themselves as saying, oh, this particular segment is to this ministry. For them, it's holistic. How do we then integrate to ensure that all the institutions are connected and integrated? And also, one of the other elements which I think should also be key, maybe in terms of institutional analysis, is to also say that how do we ensure that the indigenous local knowledge systems are also taken into account. If you look at the communities, they have their own, for instance, in Zambia, we're working with communities in the Barotse, identifying specific things that they observe, and they can tell what the season is going to be like. But in most cases, we don't incorporate that as part of the early warning systems and engagement. And maybe lastly, I see that my time is coming up, is also the issue. By co-producing with communities, we can better refine what we mean by probability, because most of the messages that are conveyed are talking about probability, which is not communicated to the people. So no wonder why some of them might not respond better to some of the early warning systems, because what does it mean in terms of their decision making? Thanks, and back to you, Deepa.
Thank you so much, Everesto. So our final panelist for today is Pulsati Rangana Indrasena, who is the Program Operations Lead and Head of Humanitarian Work at Save the Children. He has over a decade of disaster risk resilience and management experience, and he has led humanitarian and resilience building initiatives, including cash and voucher assistance programs in Sri Lanka, really focusing on amplifying the voices of women and children. Over to you, Pulsati.
Thank you, Deepa, and thank you so much for International Water Management Institute to having me here. So maybe just to give a quick intro about Save the Children. Save the Children is a world-leading independent organization for children working over 100 countries. ensure every child survive, learn, and protected. So I think during my discussion, what I want to focus is how does Save the Children, especially Sri Lanka, embedded child-sensitive and inclusive messages into emergency alert, anticipatory actions, and the broader disaster risk reduction efforts. I think this webinar series highlight that growing recognition of a critical role of multi-hazard early warning systems, but these systems only work if they are inclusive, accessible, and actionable for the communities that intend to serve. When specifically speaking about children, they make up nearly 1/3 of the global population, yet they are the often most affected by disasters. So, for early warning system to save life, including children's, it's not just about accurate forecast. It's about people need to access early warnings, understand early warnings, and trust the messages, and also have the meaning to act on them. So this is especially important for the children's, youth, women, people with disability, and especially marginalized communities. So, what is the importance of child-centered or child-sensitive early warning system? I mean, we often see we treat children as a passive recipient. We miss opportunities. So, child-centered systems see children as active messengers and active problem solvers. So children can spot the risks, adult overlook, co-create the practical early actions. For example, in Sri Lanka, we have worked with the kids to develop evacuation maps. Plus, also they act as they share messages quickly in their families and communities. So that's why the global framework like Sendai, Comprehensive School Safety and Early Warning for All has recognized and highlight the importance of child-sensitive designs. So if I speak about a little bit more about Sri Lanka and Save the Children work, I know, I mean, like in recent past, we have been working in many districts, especially across 120 locations. We have been closely working with the communities who are first responders. Basically, we strengthen these local community structures. We call it village disaster management committees through multiple interventions to ensure they are inclusive and connected with the women, children's, youth. Especially these village disaster management committee acts as a channel for inclusive early warnings. Especially through our program with the local structures, we have simplified the messages in local languages and then use the visual symbols, especially storytelling and picture or map, and use the community-driven communication to ensure early warnings is understandable for marginalized communities plus children and their communities. So one of the special scenario that I want to bring here, like we have piloted one program where we use child club, especially connect children's club with the village disaster management committee, especially to engage in monitoring the rainfall gauges and link those information for children to trigger community actions when flood risks were identified. And then it's also important through our program, we identified that the two-way communication where not just they act, but also how important we include children and marginalized communities in designing disaster risk reduction initiatives, including early warnings. So for in this session, I would like to give some lesson learned through our programs. Often we see families act fast when early warnings come through the local community structures. For example, in Sri Lanka context like village disaster management committee or women societies, rather than is coming via official channels. And also, we have been understand the importance of co-creating works, especially when children design or adapt messages, especially early warning messages. They are clear and more actionable. So, especially, I want to bring this example during our DRR work, we
Sati, we
especially
need
work
to
with
wind
children
up
to.
in a minute, please.
Yes, I will. Especially we engage with
We
kids
need to
to
wind.
develop
Could you
action
finish in
plan.
a minute, please?
Sure. Develop action plan plus especially evacuation path where entire community can understand better than where led by adult-driven processors. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very, very much to everyone. Really interesting reflections. There were a couple of questions. If I can introduce this so that I can hand it again over to the panelists, as well as to Madhavi to respond. So first of all, somebody wanted to know if the presentation and the webinar is available online. Yes, it is, and you can find the details on the chat. The second, somebody requested some data from Anna that's also already been addressed and answered. The two other questions that I would like to pose to all the speakers, and we have just 10 minutes before we close. So I would ask you to spend 2 minutes each in addressing these questions. So the first question, and you can take one question or both, make sure that you please limit your response to 2 minutes. The first question is, how does childcare and household responsibilities affect women's ability to respond to early warning on flood preparedness? The second question is, what are the limitations at a national level on finances which can be a hindrance to the delivery of gender equity and inclusion in early warning systems, as well as in response and preparedness to extreme climate events? And how can this limitation be addressed to build the capacities of national institutions to address gender in a more equitable way? So can I come first to Madhavi and then to the panelists? 2 minutes each to respond to these questions, please.
Thank you, Deepa. Let me start with the second question, the financing limitations with the state, like the government institutions. This is a fact that there are financial limitations. However, I think if the GESI aspects are integrated into the planning cycles as something which is part of the planning process, there need to be identification of the budgetary requirements for that purpose. That is one. Without accepting that this is an integral part, it's very challenging to mobilize, like within the government institutions, ad hoc finances just for gender and social inclusion. And secondly, the platforms such as AWARE that provide the coordination, the connection between the different elements that can support in a coordinated manner to mobilize the required financing, because there are a number of different sectors represented, the humanitarian, the technical, the social, and the policy decision making. So that is the second question. Do I answer both questions or let the other panelists speak, Deepa?
I think we should move to the other panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
For you, Anna, if that's okay.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the financial limitations, because I think that yes, like there are limited finances, but I think that like at the bottom of this, it's not really a problem of like financial, if there is money or if there is not money. I think it's more like an institutional coordination challenge, because it doesn't cost a lot, for example, to include gender focal points within national disaster management authorities, including across all the functions of the disaster management chain. That would be an easy way to kind of like bring in women's matters in the design and in the data collection and in the implementation. Also like ensuring that like people who represent women sit in the tables where early warning policies are discussed. And then, okay, like there is the issue of setting budget lines as well. But if that's not available, there is a lot that can be already be done with inclusion of like gender-related questions in the assessments, and then when discussing. And then like really like doing that like hard yards of coordination work and actually making sure that people come to the same table. It is like time intensive and coordination intensive, but it doesn't really cost that much. It's like more the mindset to make sure that the designs are gender inclusive, women's voices are heard. And then when it comes to targeting, like where does the few dollars or bahts or whatever are available, where do they go? Do they go to the people most in need? And do we actually know what is it that they need? Or do we just assume that they need this? So that's maybe my 5 cents for this. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Over to you, Chandrika.
Thank you, Deepa. So here I would specifically like to highlight the importance of mobilizing resources for more targeted projects on including mainstreaming gender into early warning system, because in World Vision Lanka, actually, we really make sure that all our projects and programs gender aspects are included. Gender is mainstreams in all our projects and programs. But when it comes to the inclusive community-based early warning systems, we need more targeted interventions in order to pilot and research on very effective and comprehensive data component to study some aspects of this inclusiveness in early warning systems in detail, to deep dive. So we need very targeted information, but at the moment with the current funding constraints, the organizations are a little bit struggling on securing fund on genders, targeted early warning systems and projects and related projects and programs. So in that context, I think as humanitarian organization, development organization, we should work collaboratively. We should think about more innovative funding mechanisms to invest on these projects and programs. Over.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Everest.
Thank you, Deepa. Maybe just my quick response is to the two questions. Maybe I'll start with the one on finance. Finance, it is important, but it's not necessary to address gender. There are a number of issues where people get funds, but if you don't understand what is it that you want to do in terms of understanding gender, you can get the funding, but you are not addressing gender. So what I would think is that we need a better understanding of the importance of integrating gender before you even talk about resources, because there are so many people getting financial resources which are not better targeted to addressing gender. And then on the second question, I think, which was on how does childcare impact women's response and engagement with early warning system. If you see for sub-Saharan Africa, we talk about women having the poverty of time because of the other requirements, childcare responsibilities. That is important because then it means that even for the meetings, sometimes they don't go for the meetings where early warnings are being discussed. They're not part and parcel of engagement with the early warning system. So if you don't then understand the specific circumstances of women, you might then not understand why maybe they are even being left out, even in terms of accessing the information itself. So it does matter. I think in the interest of time, I'll just stop on here. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Maristo. And last but not the least, Pulsati, over to you. Last word.
I think most of the panelists already spoke about answer the second question mostly, but I'll take the first one. I mean, yes, true. I mean, in our societies, women often carry a bulk of childcare and household responsibilities, which can delay or limit their ability to act on flood warnings. But that's also the reason why we need to include them, especially by the time disaster hits. There in the many times women are mostly vulnerable because of they are mostly in household when the disaster strike. For example, also mother may need to gather their children's elder relatives gather the belongings before evacuation, which takes time for them to react to early warnings. I think that's why it is important having an inclusive early warning system, plus also taking into consideration that caregiving roles. So they need early lead time and clear family focus instructions and safe phases. So women can also respond to early warnings effectively. Over. In this much of time, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And I think this was an amazing webinar with so much insight in so short a time. And I will not even try to summarize what people have said, also in the interest of time. But I think the message that came across really clearly is that, you know, disaster risk interventions and management is yet not inclusive enough. But when there has been intentional focus, then there have been really valuable outcomes. And not just focusing on gender, but also other key stakeholders like children. And lack of finances is much more a sort of a management issue rather than a financial issue, as was pointed out. And I think we still need to get into the messy context of domestic care work, social norms, and how women and men have different functions and responsibilities, and how that needs to be considered in the planning and design of actions. And I think several several speakers have emphasized the need and relevance for co-design and having these stakeholders and actors, end users at the planning and decision-making table. So thanks once again very much. Giriraj, should I hand over to you for a last word?
I don't have much to say. Thank you, Deepa, for summarizing, and also all the panelists and speaker for making this session much more lively and interactive, and also all the participants for participating in this session. And we look forward to you in another upcoming webinar that's going to happen on October 10th. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.